Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today I am really happy to be able to share with you another comic series which I've recently discovered, and that is a series which was published between 1989 and 1999 by Dark Horse. Dark Horse Comics are one of my favourite publishing houses because they often have slightly alternative stories and storylines, and in this case actually it's magnificent. I'm of course talking about a series which started in 1989 with Terminator Tempest, and it was followed on in 1991 by Terminator Secondary Objectives. This was followed up in 1992 by the storyline for Terminator The Enemy Within, and finally after 7 years in 1999 by Terminator Endgame. And this saga, these four stories, are what I have been sort of calling, to a certain extent, the Dudley saga. And the reason is that for me, one of the key characters, and he is a key character, but it's kind of hard to explain, but he's not necessarily the focus of the story, but for me he is this chap called Dudley. Now Dudley is introduced to us in the future as a Terminator, at least part Terminator, I-825M, and he is actually a very special being. He's actually the first prisoner of war taken by Skynet in the future. And Skynet at this point is just developing with the 800 series, the infiltrators with flesh which cover their skin, and Dudley is sort of caught in an explosion, and as a trauma specialist, someone who's actually a medic for the humans, is reconstructed by Skynet using a computer the size of a city block. And of course this was written in the late 80s, early 90s, so probably wouldn't have to be that big today. He was reconstructed for the sole purpose of being a medic for the T-800s. The endoskeleton obviously is fairly durable, but the flesh around the metal skeleton is quite an investment. We're told in the comic series it takes about a year for the flesh to form around the Terminators. So Skynet wants a being who is small, can sort of get through the battlefield and can tend to the flesh of these infiltrators, so that this investment, this time investment, lasts for as long as possible out in the field. So Dudley, or I-825M, notices in the future a group of humans led by Colonel Mary Randall, who are breaking into a facility which contains some time displacement equipment. And I have to say, right from the beginning, the artwork in this series is fantastic. It gives you a real sense of, first of all, that sort of 80s future that we see in certainly in the first and to a certain extent the second Terminator movies. But also, actually, it's got some beautifully sort of, I don't know, dripping, gory kind of elements to it as well. So when the Terminators are birthed, you get this lots of blood, and it's really great artwork, and it helps the story. It serves the story very well. Anyway, he notices this team coming in, and he wakes up some T-800s, and really the story goes from there. Now, I don't want to actually spoil the story per se. It does take part over four key chapters, four little storylines, and between each storyline there's a little bit of time which has elapsed. So by the time we get to part 4, things have definitely changed for pretty much everyone involved in the story. But really, the key thing you need to know is that the human team is being sent back not to protect John Connor, but actually to destroy Cyberdyne Systems, which in this story arc is being led by Dr. Bertram Hollister and his assistant Dr. Astin, who is an interesting character. Let's just leave that there, shall we? So it's very interesting because they're sent back to stop Cyberdyne, and the T-800s follow them through time to make sure Cyberdyne continues as is. So actually they present themselves as protectors of Dr. Hollister, which again makes for a very interesting scenario. Now, one of the things that I really enjoyed about this series was, in addition to the artwork, in addition to the setup, and in addition to, I suppose, the innate themes of what is a human being, because in the case of Dudley, he really struggles with what it is to be a human being. He really struggles with the fact that part of his brain is literally a machine, and this is represented by sort of the trauma on his skin where he's had surgery and one red eye. This is a very strong theme, and it's very powerful seeing him struggle, because he sort of regains his hope. When he goes back in time, he suddenly sees that humanity hasn't always been like rats, scurrying through the undergrowth. So he sees that actually that there is hope for humanity, and that's a wonderful theme. But in addition to all that stuff, I really actually very much enjoyed the I suppose the insight that we get into, at the very least, how the writers of this story perceive the Terminators as working, and indeed how they work together. They have a sort of version of Wi-Fi where they can communicate, obviously without words, complicated instructions, directions. They can ask for backup. They can get each other's location, and this makes for some very interesting scenarios, especially with Dudley, because he, as the story progresses, doesn't necessarily want to be sharing information in the same way, and it makes for some very striking moments. It really underlines the machine within the flesh, as it were. Speaking about that, actually, also, this series has some immensely badass female Terminators. So T-800s with female flesh, which aren't the Terminatrix as was brought to us in Terminator 3. They don't necessarily trade on their sexuality, although this one does to a certain extent, but you don't have that sort of naffness of making her boobs bigger or anything like that. But despite that, she's also very much a T-800 inside. So there's a key moment where she's just stabbed some dude, and she's just standing there having this Wi-Fi communication, very long distance, with another Terminator, and that's fantastic. I really enjoy this sort of insight into how they work together, because they have very efficient conversations, which is quite funky. So there's not a lone Terminator in this, although there is a Terminator who sort of goes very much on his own, and that's C890L, I think he's called. And C890L has a fascinating story arc through the course of these four chapters. Or he certainly changes physically as well, because at one point he has to perform some field repairs on himself, and gives himself a real badass biker makeover. Like, he literally has metal horns, proper metal thing going on, and that's amazing in terms of its visuals. So once again we come back there to the striking visuals which are present in this story. So the story here is intriguing. It has all these different themes going on. It's presented very well in terms of the artwork, but also as well, actually, we have a very good side story as well, in the case of Detective Sloan, I believe, Mark Sloan, which sort of comes full circle in part 4. So in part 4 we have a bit more about him and his work, I suppose, but that's also good as well. What am I getting at? I suppose ultimately what I'm getting at is that this whole story, this whole Dudley saga, as I've decided to call it, presents an excellent alternative to Terminator 2. Now you may be thinking, why on earth would you ever want to replace Terminator 2? And to be honest, I suppose you don't want to, but ultimately subsequent movies have done that, and other Terminator fiction has played with the timeline so much. Certainly, for example, Terminator Genesis, the most recent film, which I haven't seen but I know enough about, has really monkeyed with it, to the point where actually this is absolutely fine as far as I'm concerned, and it presents a Sarah Connor scenario in the background to the story, which is very interesting, and actually ultimately ends on a note which has implications for a very, very interesting alternative future. So this idea of the future is not yet written. It's very much pans out in these stories, and we literally see things getting more and more desperate for Skynet as the story progresses. So it is interesting, because it does offer that alternative to Terminator 2, and I think it does it very well, and it does it so well that I would like to see this story as a movie. You can possibly see that there are elements of this story which have been woven into, for example, Terminator Salvation, the convict storyline, where he becomes part Terminator and isn't quite sure what he is until it's revealed. The perfect infiltrator or whatever. But actually, having a character like Dudley, who's actually the embodiment of the tragedy of that character, far more really than what we saw in Terminator Salvation, and especially the way that Dudley ends up. Again, I'm not going to spoil that. Is something which I would love to see explored in a Terminator movie, because it would bring back some of those key themes, you know, because like in the first Terminator film, there was a real strong sense of man and machine. What makes you human? What makes it worth fighting? Well, what's worth fighting for? How durable is the human body? You know, we have bones which have this similar tensile strength to steel or whatever, this kind of thing. What actually makes the human machine different from a robot? And you sort of see that certainly in the struggle in the first film between the Kyle Reese character and the Terminator. That plays out, you know, in a gloriously horrific way, certainly towards the end of that movie. And in some ways this carries on with those themes and takes them even further, to the point where people who are downright prejudiced from the future, in terms of what a Terminator is, have to reassess what they think about man and machine and where the two meet. So yeah, I'd love to see it as a movie, but it probably won't happen. Anyway, I've rambled on a little bit about this now. I really don't want to spoil the story, so I'm going to stop talking about it. But do give it a go. If you get a chance, check out this story arc. I actually came across them in my local geek emporium. They were just sort of down, sort of second-hand graphic novels down in the on a bookshelf in the corner. I sort of picked them up for a couple of pounds each, and on eBay they are very much available. So Amazon as well, so on Amazon. But yeah, check it out. It's a great story, well told, and frankly a worthy sequel to Terminator. You know, much more worthy than Terminator 3 or Salvation or Genesis. Anyway guys, as ever, until next time, whatever you get up to, do take care. Bye bye.